Nice.
So later on in the pod, we will talk to one of my mates whose liver would suffer terribly from a Giants playoff run. But also we have a very special guest joining us now. He's for my money, one of the best play-by-play guys in the business. He's covered everything from Final Fours to Wake Forest wide receivers playing quarterback in the NFL. And this weekend he will be in the booth watching Russell Wilson try and avoid Leonard Williams and the New York Giants. Welcome to the Pedestrian Podcast, Adam Amin.
Hello, friends. How are you?
Not too bad. How are you? It's been an interesting 2020, I'm sure, for you all the way through, hasn't it?
Yeah, certainly. It's, I imagine for everybody in their own individual circumstances, a lot of the same, but certainly unique for our line of work, getting to navigate travel and preparation and Zoom calls as far as the eye can see, or stomach, frankly, at this point. So it's still very fortunate, though. Very fortunate and grateful to actually get a chance to be doing this at this time.
Yeah, so we were supposed to have you on a few weeks ago, but your health took over. Obviously, you wrote, and after once you got through the other side, you wrote a brilliant thread on social media about your experience with COVID. I had my parents and younger brother test positive around a similar time. It's just a brutal thing, isn't it? I think it's amazing that some people still don't realize the true effects it can have on a person.
Yeah, it was, it's disappointing, and I wish, that weren't necessarily the case. We were, I don't wish it on anybody. I'm certainly understanding of people who, don't feel like anything too bad's going to happen to them. That's fine. Oftentimes that is the case. And I hope that if you run into this, if you're, you have the misfortune of running into something like this, hopefully it doesn't really affect you. I hope that is the case, but I wasn't. I was a little scared for certainly a few days. Legitimately frightened and very concerned about what was happening to my body. And thankful about 4 weeks from the worst of it now, and starting to feel about as close to normal as I can remember feeling before all that hit. So it's gotten a lot better. And Stu, thanks for saying that. I do appreciate that.
No worries, Adam.
The league in itself has been pretty bullish in the way it's carried through all the way through the year. I mean, the draft didn't get moved, and there's been so many discussions of, well, that's not going to happen. And until the Baltimore game this week, we've pretty much done well. And the Swan has kind of floated fairly effortlessly across the water, but underneath those legs must be paddling like crazy to get everything going. How's it been different for you this year compared to a normal year in inverted commas in terms of scheduling? And has there been obviously testing? Has it been much more trying in your role? Because there's so much going on to get these games on, and we probably don't hear enough about your side of things and how that happens.
Sure. I hesitate to even say it's overly trying. I hesitate because I don't think my scenario or the scenario of a lot of my colleagues is anywhere near what a lot of other people are dealing with currently. So I hesitate to. I strictly say
within
that
context. Within context.
Yeah, within context. Yeah. So with that established, for us personally, I still wouldn't say it's as trying. It's a lot more complex. Certainly, it's a little bit more to navigate than ever before. Dealing with the medical testing and all of that, which again, fortunate to have access to. In all honesty, I in any other line of work, I don't know if I'd be traveling as much, but I also may not have access as we were lucky enough to have. So I'm thankful for that. I do think not being able to establish, now to get into the broadcast side of it, not being able to establish that personal connection that really makes this job special. It's certainly wonderful in its own right. Being able to commentate on sporting events is it's a joke of a job. So I'm certainly thankful to be in position to have that. But, one of the great aspects of it is that personal connectivity and being able to establish relationships with people to kind of reignite relationships that you've had in years past. I got to cover Leonard Fournette when he was a high school player in New Orleans, Louisiana, and called one of his nationally televised games where he was spectacular. And I'd called a couple of his games at LSU, and now seeing him find a new home and some success in the NFL, I wanted to talk to him about that and catch up with him. I talked to Taysom Hill the other day, and you do it on a phone call, which you might do during the year anyway, but more often than not, you're in the same room and you're shaking hands. And I had a text from Mac Brown, the former Texas head coach and now current North Carolina coach in college football, and my former television partner. And he was, reminiscing with me about having to face Taysom Hill, giving up 250 rushing yards in a collegiate game to BYU and Taysom Hill. So I wanted to be able to talk to him about that because we got to have that conversation a few years back. So you miss out on those things. Is it much harder? I don't personally think so. I truly am, I'm not trying to play the humble card, but I'm truly grateful that we do get to do this and it's not overly taxing on us. But yeah, there are elements to it that are certainly strange, foreign. The no fans in most of these stadiums is eerie at times, but we also get distracted in the middle of games by the game itself. So we're still having a good time. So again, a lot worse situations that you could be in. Certainly a little more complex than it was years past.
Yeah. Over here, when COVID first started, sort of shut everything down, we have Andrew Coltart, who covers golf for our broadcasters. He posted somewhat viral videos of him commentating on what his dogs were doing for their breakfast, right, just to try and cover a loose end. I'm guessing you had quite a hectic schedule planned when the whole sporting world shut down. How did you manage to bide your time until it was rebooted back up in July, August?
Yeah, it's strange to try to navigate Netflix and PlayStation and see how much one person can take from that, right? I don't get me wrong, things I certainly enjoy. I certainly won't turn down a chance to play Warzone with my friends. But it was, everybody had to figure something out. And I was in the fortunate position to be able to be inside, not associate with anybody unless absolutely necessary, and FaceTime a bunch of people that I hadn't connected with. I was able to find some silver linings in it, and I hope that's the case for anybody else who's in the position to find some silver linings. But I shut down for the first time in a long time. You said it, Stu. I was ready to, I was in Texas for the American Conference men's basketball tournament. And this is in the lead up to eventually doing the NCAA women's tournament all 3 weekends, including the Final Four, then going into Chicago, finishing up my Chicago Bulls duties, then going right into the NBA playoffs for ESPN and ESPN Radio. And also calling some Major League Baseball games, and then eventually the Women's College World Series. And then my contract was supposed to be up. So I had all this work schedule planned and ready to go. And then all of a sudden, for the first time in more than a decade, maybe 15 years, I didn't do anything for the span of about 4 months. And that was very strange, actually closer to 5 months. So never really dealt with something like that, or hadn't really dealt with something like that in a long time professionally, but it was nice personally, again, in Adam, as you said, in the context of where I was at, it was nice to be able to shut down. I'd been going 100 miles an hour for a long time. And in all honesty, it may have been something important for me and maybe a lot of people to kind of prioritize some things and realize what was important. And, hopefully that's the silver lining that some people walked away with.
Yeah. Adam?
Listening to you there, it struck me that from a cultural standpoint, you may not know this, but in the UK, our commentators do one sport. Mm-hmm. And if Martin Tyler, who is the lead commentator on soccer, popped up doing rugby, there would be social media chaos. How does that impact you? Presumably there's a cadence and a toning issue from sport to sport, and kind of clicking from one to the other must be quite difficult. You will have a preference one way or the other on a sport that you do, but just take us a little bit behind that, because it's such a unique thing for a British audience to imagine commentators going from one sport to another Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to think. We don't think about that oftentimes in America, because for so long, going back to the 1970s, broadcasters like Marv Albert, who was, famous in the 1990s more than anything else for calling the NBA for NBC and all those Michael Jordan championships, or most of those Michael Jordan championships. He was somebody who would do on a Sunday, he would call a Giants football game followed by an afternoon New York Rangers game, and then maybe a Knicks game at night, and then go do the 11 p.m. sports on NBC. And it's just, we were always kind of taught that not all the great, I shouldn't say that. There are plenty of single sport phenomenal Hall of Fame caliber commentators, in particular in baseball, and I would say in basketball as well here in America. But we kind of grew up with a lot of commentators who all did multiple sports here in Chicago. Even some of the local announcers for our specific teams would go do national or regional television work for networks or do games on the radio or whatever it may have been. So when I first started doing this as a focus for a potential career in college, I just did everything because I just assumed that's what you were supposed to do. So for me, it was trying to build a skill set that would function in a career setting in America, which was being able to do both television and radio, being able to call multiple sports, and feeling comfortable working just about year round. And not to say that that's what I want to do forever. That's part of the reason I went from a network like ESPN to go to Fox Sports. It was an opportunity to narrow down my portfolio a little bit. I'd covered something like 7 or 8 sports consistently every year, every calendar year for ESPN and ESPN radio. And it was nice to be able to say the 3 sports, in particular, I'm a pro sports fan, professional sports fan, because I grew up in a city like Chicago, where I'm currently at. It's a very provincial town that takes a lot of pride in its regionality, its city structure, and the teams that occupy it. Whereas I never really got a feel for collegiate athletics. I enjoyed it thoroughly: college basketball, college softball, baseball, and of course calling college football games for a decade. It's a thrill. It's wonderful theater, and it's wonderful to be in those large scale stadiums with all those fans who are so passionate. But to me, I grew up on pro sports. I was a fan of the teams, and it was nice to be able to say I'd like to do just 3 sports now. And now calling NBA for the Chicago Bulls, calling NFL and Major League Baseball for Fox. It's kind of the situation I would hope to find myself in at some point. I'm thankful I get to do that now. But you're right. It's very common for a lot of announcers in this country, at least when they have the opportunity to do 2, 3, sometimes 4 sports.
So one of the first times, probably the first time I heard you put a name to the face was the Notre Dame title run a few years ago. Obviously, you didn't sit down in the Final Four and then the finals go, I'm going to have a call in the next couple of hours, which will live on forever, basically. But when it came down to Ogbunawale and a reaction to how your call was perceived by people watching and listening at home, that must be a fun thing to live through and be reminded of ever so often, as I'm sure you are.
You don't hope, obviously, and I think you kind of alluded to it as well, Stu. You don't hope to go into it thinking about that. You don't go into these jobs and into these events thinking about that. You go in just trying to. I was just trying not to get too nervous and trying not to mess it up. This was a big deal for me. This was a championship event. Calling the women's Final Four in America, it's collegiate athletics Final Four, college basketball, men or women, is a big deal. So I took that very seriously, and I was more nervous for that as maybe anything I'd done in my career at ESPN at that point. So when we were, I guess handed these incredible games, you just let them happen, and you react naturally and organically. And one thing I'm proud of is that I felt that all 4 of us, the 3 of us at the table, myself, Rebecca Lobo, Carol Lawson, and then Holly Rowe, who's our excellent reporter, I was hoping that it would just feel organic throughout, and it did. And all the preparation and all the games that we had done all year leading up to that made it feel very natural for us. So when it happened, we just reacted organically and naturally. And I'm an exuberant announcer. I'm an exuberant person when I'm in that type of setting, and it's one of the reasons I love doing the job, which I'm sure a lot of announcers feel the same. I just reacted the way I would typically react for anything else. And to have that moment and to not have screwed it up too badly, and then to have another one a couple of nights later for the championship itself, very, very cool. It's something you hope for as an announcer. At some point, you hope to have one moment like that, and I've been very, very lucky to be a part of a handful at various points in the last few years.
I mean, it's amazing that she did it twice as well, isn't it?
And absolutely.
Adam? So
you go into a game this Sunday, and before Daniel Jones limps off the field, the Giants, potentially looking at, they could win the division, and that in itself, adds a gravitas to it. Colt McCoy comes in, and the game now looks like you can't say this, but we can say it's a Seahawks podcast. It's a bit more of a duck than it was maybe 3 or 4 days
sure.
ago. Going into a game like that, presumably, does that have to change your preparation in the sense that you might have more kind of to fill because the game itself doesn't take the broadcast away for you. You've got a relationship with your co-commentator, obviously. Do you is there a nod going into that game like, we probably know what we're going to see today, and the onus might be on us to make this more entertaining than the 60 minutes itself?
Yeah, I would like to hope, and this is a subjective thing. I do hope that every game we do bring that level of preparation. I do pride myself on that. Mark does as well. But I think you're right. When we go into a game knowing that it may be a little lopsided, as we did this past Sunday in that Broncos Saints game, that the betting line had moved from something like 6 points to 14 in just a matter of hours. In fact, some of the sports books here in the United States took the game off the board because so it's such a unique circumstance. So we knew that was a possibility, and you always kind of prepare with the understanding that if it does become one of these games, you better be prepared so that you can fill that space and be aware of what's happening around the rest of the league, which is always good when we have what we consider the later window in America on Sundays. Games are already going on, the 3-4 hours prior. So we want to make sure we're up to date on, what are the Rams doing? I know the 49ers are playing Monday night. What's happening in the rest of the division, because it affects Seattle. What's happening to the Saints, and what's happening to the Packers? What's happening to those teams that are in the hunt? We want to be able to not shape the narrative because there's so much more so much time left to go, but we want to be able to at least push the narrative forward as to what the stakes are each week and in each game. So we do keep that in mind as well. And yeah, we have some more stories. We have a little, a few discussion pieces. One of the things I just emailed our television crew before we all started chatting was, can the Seahawks have a Kansas City-like defensive resurgence in the second half this year, in the final stretch this year, the way the Chiefs did a year ago? And that certainly helped propel them to the point where they were good enough on both sides of the ball to win a Super Bowl. So that's a discussion that I bring up on a Tuesday, and if some emails start going back and forth or some texts start going back and forth, oh, I like that. Hey, do we have a stat to back this concept up? Do we have pictures for this story that we may want to tell? We do a lot of that heavy lifting early in the week, and a lot of the heavy lifting for the game itself, I think for me and for Mark and Lindsay and our crew, takes place later in the week, where we get to talk with coaches, talk with players. All the previews come out for the games. Articles are written closer to Sunday, so we start to absorb all of that information and figure out how to organize it in the potential case of disseminating it.
So this weekend is the second game you'd cover for the Seahawks. It was obviously supposed to be the third before COVID affected your travel plans and our body clocks when the Cardinals run game was flexed out to Sunday Night Football 6-7 weeks ago.
Right.
But the one game you called of ours this year was the opener in Atlanta. It was the beginning, or what we thought was the beginning of a new phase of this offense for Russell Wilson, and obviously the start of this DK Metcalf ascension. This must be a fun offense to prep, and especially someone like DK watch on a Sunday in the booth.
Absolutely. Mark and I were texting while we were watching the game last night. By the way, so we weren't, another twist, we weren't initially on this game. For this week, Seattle and New York. We were originally on Pittsburgh and Washington. And then with all the drama of the Pittsburgh-Baltimore game, and then the Baltimore-Dallas game, and then in turn the Pittsburgh-Washington game all being pushed, it was early enough in the week where it's not a big issue at all. That's going to be a prime time or close to prime time in America game on Fox. And with Joe Buck and the number one crew calling the Tuesday game between Baltimore and Dallas, the number two team of Kevin Burkhardt, Daryl Johnston, they'll slide in and do the Monday afternoon, late evening, early primetime window, which makes all the sense in the world in terms of how, our crews are disseminated games. So at least this time, it wasn't on Thursday the way that it was the last time when we suddenly got flexed over to Las Vegas, Tampa Bay. The last game, which I'm fully convinced I blame Las Vegas for the potential COVID contraction at that point. But anyway, I digress. Speaking of this offense, it's watching it last night. Mark and I are texting and just talking about how good Chris Carson is and how much his re-addition to the roster propels them and balances them and makes things even easier for Russell Wilson when the defense is playing a little bit softer to find DK Metcalf in some of these more intermediate, short and intermediate, over the middle type routes. These high movement routes that maybe get him to the outside when the defense is a little bit softer. DK can operate more and make those moves and use his strength and size and space creating body to get open for Russell Wilson. And this has actually been a year where Russell's on target percentage on his throws is a little bit lower than league average. So I know that's a little bit of a surprise because he's always been a fairly accurate QB, but also part of that is going to come with taking more deep shots, with being on the run a little bit more. That's one thing that we've seen again, which has been a constant in Russell's career. A lot of scramble plays that are originally designed as pass plays. He's had the second most in the league this year behind Deshaun Watson, a lot of that having to do with the offensive line. But to have this balance with Carson to create more lanes for Metcalf, I think it only makes this offense scarier. Right now, it's probably number one or number two, I think, offensively in the NFC because Drew Brees is hurt for the Saints right now. If Drew Brees is healthy with the way their defense has played, one of the best in the league, I think New Orleans is probably the best team in this conference. But the current state where the defense has played better and the offense has taken up more space, been on the field a little bit more, Metcalf has sustained drives. Having Carson back will only help you sustain drives. I think this is an offense that is, all-world caliber right now, considering. Now, I know they had struggles last night. I understand that, watching them against Philadelphia. But Philadelphia's defense has not been the issue this year. Their offense is absolutely dreadful. So I have some respect for the Philadelphia defense and Jim Schwartz in particular against good running backs and good quarterbacks. They've been okay this year. So I don't think that game last night was an indication of everything. But I do think the Seattle offense is one to be reckoned with.
Adam?
Look, Mark's not listening to this, so we can go ahead and call you the star of the show in the booth. It's fine, don't worry. But if we were going to give Robin to your Batman a bit of credit, something that amazes me about color commentators, and obviously I don't mean no disrespect to Mark, he's an amazing broadcaster. When they can just see a play and in 3 seconds diagnose, well, this guard has done that, or that receiver has done that. Obviously, you focus more on kind of saying what's happening and they'll focus on the analysis. It leaves me dumbfounded how quickly they're able to pick something up that would take me kind of 10 looks to see. Is that just the advanced research that's coming in, or is there stuff? Have you got 27,000 screens going on? I just don't understand how he does it.
It's one of the truly unique skill sets, I think, is to be a translator of this information, right? To see something visually that is fairly complex, that is created of several simple movements that create something much complex. The simple movements are where you go, what step do you take, which side, do you step with your left or your right foot? Do you step back fully or take a half step back? Do you angle this way or angle this way? These are all simple movements that create very complex structures and schemes. And that's the, Madden play call sheet that you pick when you hit the button to pick that play. By the way, that's the only way I ever have an opportunity to do things like that is strictly in video game form. But seeing all those simple movements create something so complex, and then to translate all of that all the way back down and break it down into the one thing that you feel was most important in that play, or one or two things sometimes when we have more time to show these replays that, our technical crew does a spectacular job of showing. It's fascinating. It's a truly unique skill set. And then to be able to do it in a fashion that is, easy to process, it's consumable, and it doesn't take away from the enjoyment of the game, because that's all we're doing. It's just a game. That's a unique skill set. And in that sense, my job is far easier than, and I think play-by-play in particular is far easier in that case than analysis. I'm glad I don't have to take all of that information and try to break it down. For me, it's more about reacting to what happens and trying to support it with information, whether it's information right at my fingertips, like how many yards was that run, which player was it, who made the tackle, simple and easily visible things like that, or into more anecdotal or advanced statistical information to try to set things up, for the audience to have an understanding of it. These are. I will say, I don't think our job is rocket science, but I do think it's a unique skill set to have, and it's easy to do it okay. I don't think it's that hard to do in an okay fashion, in a passable fashion. I think it's a very difficult job to do very well and very efficiently and do it very consistently in those manners.
Yeah, I mean, we see people like Gary Neville over here, don't we? I don't know, he seems to has made the step from player to broadcaster. Wow, we kind of learn every time he speaks. Now, Adam, on this very, very niche pod last year, repeatedly, I said that I thought you and your Thursday night football college crew should be in the reckoning for the Monday night football crew when that was a topic of discussion. How fun was that working? I mean, you went to some wild places with Molly McGrath, the wild man, which is Pat McAfee, and obviously a Seahawks legend, a Seahawks icon, and without Russell Wilson, leads all Seahawks passing stats in Matt Hasselbeck. That must have been a lot of fun, particularly with the wild man.
Indeed, it was. Molly is a close friend of mine for many years. We've worked together on multiple football crews now. Matt, I had always been a fan of. I'd always heard wonderful things about him. On the rare occasions that he did call games, I would always tune in. It would typically be a Thursday game while I was preparing for a Friday or a Saturday, so I'd watch their game, and I always thought he and Tim both were very good and very entertaining. I love their dynamic. And I only knew so much about Pat McAfee before I heard every raging wild story, before every incredible first impression, before every review of any stand-up act that he would pop up and do in Indianapolis. I was thoroughly intimidated by Pat, and for no reason other than his reputation had preceded him. And to find out that he is just an absolute sweetheart of a human being, and as kind as they come, and entertaining and energetic, and too much to handle for some people, I'm sure. But for those who understand where he's coming from and see how relatable he happens to be for what I consider to be in this profession a superstar. And I mean that by recognition. When we go anywhere, we'd go anywhere on these college campuses last year. I mean, there was a swath of 18 to 23-year-old young men and women who just knew who he was and were fans of him, and thought he was the coolest person around, and had no desire other than to take a selfie with him and tell him how wonderful he is, because he has that impact on people. And he handles it with such grace and class, and he's just as kind as they can be. And he's also one of the savviest people I've ever met. He is truly I don't think savant does him justice. I don't think that it's random, that he just knows things. He's a really smart individual, and a tremendously media savvy human being, business savvy human being. And I'm as big a fan of his as anybody I've worked with. We had an absolute blast. We became very close friends. I still talk to all three on a frequent basis, and I'm thankful to have them as good close friends, and happy to see what they do professionally as well skyrocket.
I mean, he's on a WWE pay-per-view in about 2 or 3 weeks, actually wrestling, which is just he's insane.
How wasn't that shocking? Like he acclimated himself
he's
to
so good
that
at
world so quickly, and the athleticism he showed in the match that he wrestled was fantastic.
Yeah.
The guy, that's why it's not he's just this way. He's fearless. He's very confident.
It's the only thing in WWE I've watched this year, I think, is his first match and all of his promos. You said you're based in Chicago. You grew up in Chicago around a pretty cool time in not just Chicago sports, but worldwide sports. Obviously, it's a period which was prominent through the first lockdown we had. What was that like? And now when the season reboots at Christmas or whatever it is in the NBA, you're going to be calling games for the Chicago Bulls as well. I mean, that must have been a bucket list thing, but how was that growing up with the Jordan Bulls and another bucket list thing of calling their games in 2021 and beyond? It's
a full circle type of moment, I think, for me personally, and very fortunate for that. It's I was thankful that when they even asked to have me fill in a couple times a year, and I got to do that for a couple of seasons, and thankful obviously for that, because you get to build rapport with the people who you may be working with in a lot on a much more frequent basis. I got to build a rapport working with Stacey King, who is a Bulls legend and beloved in this city for both his playing days and for his commentating, and just another grizzly bear looking guy who would be intimidating if you didn't know him. And then you realize he's just a teddy bear, and he's just a sweetheart and an amazing person and a great friend, somebody who made me feel very comfortable right out of the gate. And again, it's a full circle thing. I grew up watching Stacey as a kid on television, and to now not just call him a partner, but call him a friend, and to be, getting to be working together on a consistent basis, and just, in a week plus his time, it's incredible. And, I think going back to how the connectivity began, it's, when you have a winner in a town, everybody gravitates to it. It's a uniting factor in this city. I think during the 90s, that was a uniting thing in this city. Everybody in the city gravitated towards the Bulls. And I think the other thing that people forget, and I've forgotten this too, and I've lived here most of my life, the Bulls have the biggest fan base of any team in this city. And that's not just because of the city. Obviously, that's a big part of it, because of people like me and everybody older than me who grew up watching these championship level teams. But this is a worldwide brand. And those Jordan years are a wonderful reflection of that. I think a lot of people during the lockdown had an opportunity to watch The Last Dance, and still probably do. I think it's still online. They really dove deep into understanding why this was such a global phenomenon, and Jordan being at the forefront of that, to go into Barcelona during the 92 Olympics and to have a massive billboard, a dozen or so stories, maybe bigger than that, have his image on it, to the tune of what, footballers like Ronaldo and Messi deal with now, that level of fame. It's wild. And that's why it's such an incredible organization to be a part of. And that's without adding the personal aspects of my connectivity to it.
Yeah, Adam?
Conscious that we've kept you for a couple of minutes longer than you said. So just quickly, you nodded at names like Martin Tyler and Gary Neville. So maybe you've got a bit of an affinity with British sports, whatever. Have you been over here before and traveled over here? And dare we ask if you've got a soccer team over here that you root for? Could make or break the whole thing, Adam. I'm not going to lie.
It's, I don't think you have to worry too much about that. I have a certain fondness for Arlo White, as he has a fondness for us in Chicago as well, being a fan of some of our teams. But I'm a huge fan of Arlo. I message with him now as fellow announcers, which is kind of a shock and just a real cherry on top of the ice cream sundae that is this fraternity. I get to ask him about what it's like to be on Ted Lasso and things of that nature. And I don't have a football team that I am perfectly loyal to. I think my experience is playing FIFA and just being drafted onto whatever Premier League team will have me, and my terrible likeness with no athleticism. I just kind of gravitate towards that. I enjoy the sport. I enjoy watching Premier League soccer. I was fascinated by Maradona, watching his HBO documentary. Another thing, by the way, that bonded McAfee and I, he and I both watched that Maradona documentary multiple times. I was fascinated by this man's life in the lead up to his last several years. But he and I both bonded over that. So I find the sports history more and more fascinating as I get older and more exposed to it. So I don't show any allegiance because I don't have any, but I do enjoy being able to dip my toe in the waters of it.
Well, whenever your travels, work maybe brings you over here, make sure to hit us up and we'll be sure to write the red carpet and look after you. Maybe for a Seahawks game at Adam's Tottenham Hotspur Stadium next October.
Yeah, I thought
that would be wonderful.
When you said Arlo, I thought you were going to the Arsenal route. So thankfully, you saved yourself at the last minute, Adam.
So I fear if it was any type of Liverpool Manchester rivalry or any type of United or City rivalry, I was scared I'd walk into something like that.
It's all right, don't worry. You're fine.
So just to wrap up, weirdly, we seem to ask our American guests a food question. Adam is a caterer by trade, and we've had several. We had Madre Harper, who's actually on the Giants does not like. He was my favorite player in the draft last year. We had him on the podcast, and he does not like coconut, which is a weird thing. But so obviously Thanksgiving was last week, and I mean, what's your take on Thanksgiving? Obviously, or what is a controversial food thing that you hold dear that no one else agrees with?
I've actually got a question I can ask you. I'm fascinated what you put on your hot dog, because Chicago, that is quite a big deal over there.
I'll address both of those. I think there's some connectivity to both. With Thanksgiving last week. So I grew up without Thanksgiving. You know, my parents are Pakistani immigrants and came to this country in the late 70s and mid 80s. So I didn't understand what Thanksgiving was. I just knew it was time off from school. So I was happy about that. It was a few extra days for me to sit at home in front of the television. So I had no problem with it. And then as I got older and realized, you know, when in college you go home for a week and you're just kind of sitting around at home, not much to do. And one of my closest friends from high school said, "Hey, you should come over and have Thanksgiving with my family. We'd love to have you." So I said, "Sure. Yeah, I got nothing going on." So I went over for my first Thanksgiving when I was 19 years old. And realized that, you know, I always knew what the food, you know, you eat turkey and everybody has a favorite food. I never understood it. I had no context for it in a first person perspective until I was almost an adult. So I grew to love it because of, it's just the holiday where everybody eats a ton of food and everybody's thankful for something. Great. So it works out great. So I gravitated towards it. I'll fill my plate. I think strawberry pretzel salad is a food item that not a lot of people know what it is. There's no salad in it. It's pretzels crushed together, some kind of bonding food. So oftentimes caramel will do. You can add some chocolate into it, cream, and a strawberry puree that's mixed into it with, and it's kind of created into almost a cake-like entity. So it's delicious. It's crunchy. It's salty. It's sweet. People that like that's as controversial of a Thanksgiving take food wise as I can have. Adam, to your hot dog point, again, being from Chicago, my parents owned a fast food restaurant for a while, so I cooked and created and assembled and distributed a lot of Chicago style hot dogs. So for me, the ultimate hot dog for me has always been a Chicago style hot dog. That's it's very specific. You gents may know it, but it's it's a garden hot dog basically. It's a all beef Chicago hot dog, wedge of tomato, diced onions, bright green relish, sliver of mustard, never ketchup, celery salt, pickles, and sport peppers. And it's been dragged through the garden, and it's delicious, and it's how they've always done it in Chicago for as many years as I can remember. And I think it's still the superior hot dog of all.
In your honor, I might have to whiz one of those up on Sunday whilst watching the game.
Also, one more food thing. When you are over here, or if you are ever over here, we'll have to introduce you to Viennetta, which is a tweet I saw from you it's the ice cream, which you had no idea of, and it seemed to catch a bit of virality. But Viennetta was a staple at my grandma's house when I was a kid growing up for Sunday lunch.
They tried to bring it into America as like, I remember the commercials for it, and it was like they put it in a glass, and everybody's wearing like fancy gloves and tuxedos and dresses, and they were trying to really class it up. I didn't understand what it was. I was like, all right, whatever that is. And then somebody brought it to my attention. It looks delicious. Yeah. Why wouldn't anybody not want it? Why would anybody not want to consume this? Yeah. Perhaps in one sitting, which I think I'd be capable of doing.
But yeah, massively appreciate you taking the time to jump on and talk to us two fools. And have a safe trip out to Seattle. And obviously, if you want to give a shout out to us or say something you think is the most British thing we say, we will be listening, because we pay attention when it's a Seahawks game, just to try and distract from 3 and out after 3 and out. And also, next time we speak to Matt, tell him that us UK guys said hi, and there's a third mic open for him anytime he wants as well.
Absolutely will, and looking forward to calling the game on Sunday.
Where can people find you, Adam, if they want to catch up with your stuff?
At Adam Amin on Twitter. That's the easiest, most accessible way to say terrible things to be if the Seahawks go 3 and out too many times.
Cool. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely.